Okay, so we have discussed a personal message sequence, and now I want to talk about some consequences and following through on that personal message. Uh, to do that, we'll talk about the reasons why children may not be doing that thing that you're hoping they would do. And there's going to be several of these. So the first reason that a child may not be living up to your expectations is they're just not sure either what the rule is or what the expectation is or what behavior they have to do in order to follow that rule. Or they're not able to figure out, they may have an idea of what the appropriate behavior is, but they can't figure out how to do it or how to get out of what they're doing and start doing that behavior. Or what the adult expects is something that they can't do. It's not appropriate in terms of DAP. It's not something that they can accomplish. Now, these aren't the only reasons for behavior problems, they're just the first three, but all of these share something in common. These three do. They're a mistake the adult made. They were an inappropriate way the adult made the rules. So remember, you have to make clear what your expectations are. You have to make clear what alternatives behaviors are that children could substitute for those others. Your rules and redirections should be specific, clear, definable, and stated in the positive what to do kind of way. Another reason that children may not be following that rule or redirection, they know it, but right now they're so caught up in something that they act without thinking. They act on impulse. They're not reflecting on what they're doing. They're doing the first thing that popped into their head. And one solution for this, well, the overall solution for this is to help children slow down and be more reflective. This is like, I bet many of you remember when you were little and you were angry, somebody told you to count to three or uh, run around the house three times or do something that was basically saying, slow down. One way that this works with young children is what's called self-talk. And this is where we give children little scripts that they can say to themselves. So a child is having a hard time waiting in line, and we say, tell yourself, I can wait. Say, I can wait. I can keep my hands down. Tell yourself, I can do it. And what we're doing is we're trying to get them to internalize, to say that statement out loud until they internalize and just say it in their head uh, after practicing that several times. So we want them to learn these kinds of strategies to slow down and be more reflective. Another reason that children may not be following the rules is they may have faulty kind of self-perceptions. And there's going to be some different groups here. One group are children who you've heard people say, oh, they just want your attention. And that can happen sometimes. The child has learned that negative attention is better than no attention. They've learned the way that they relate to the world or that they get attention from adults is by intentionally and purposefully violating the adults' rules. And so this is one of those situations where this child has developed this self-perception over time. This didn't happen just like that, and you're not going to fix it just like that. But you need to give this child messages over time that there are better ways to get the attention that they're trying to seek. So one part of that strategy is when they're doing that thing that you want them to do, you really find opportunities to praise that. You really find as many opportunities as you can to praise their positive behaviors and to give them attention for those things you want to see repeated. When they're doing something, they're kind of looking at you out of the side of their eye to see if you're watching while they uh, drop the paintbrush on the floor or something, and it's something that's not going to hurt somebody. It's not going to hurt them. It's not going to tear something up. You ignore it. And this is hard to do sometimes because adults tend to try to sometimes take these things kind of personally. If it's not going to hurt anybody, don't give them any attention for it. Don't give them that feedback, even if it's negative. If it is a situation that's more serious, We give a personal message, but our reflection is from we put it right on the table and we call them on it and we say the reflection is, you would really like my attention right now. It's not you dropped the paintbrush or you were trying to paint. We really call them on. Somebody down the houses there just started playing a, a, a saxophone or something. I can't explain that. Um, so we say, you would really like my attention. When you are painting appropriately, I will give you some attention. And we make it clear that our attention is going to be tied with them following what that expectation is. And again, we're not going to fix this in a day, but we're going to have the plan and we're going to follow through. We're going to communicate that with other adults and we're going to work on that over time. Another situation that can happen is sometimes a child develops a kind of hapless orientation. The message they hear from the world around them is, God, kid, why can't you ever get anything right? What is wrong with you? And they develop this sense of themselves as being helpless, that they can't, they are not able to do things. And so we've got to be really careful here not to intentionally or unintentionally reinforce that negative self-perception. And sometimes we do it because really nice people do it because they're like, oh, I don't want to make him feel like he has to do something he can't do. So be careful not to reinforce those negative self-perceptions and give them opportunities to succeed and point out to them when they succeed. That helpless child or hapless child, when they do succeed, they're often in their mind thinking, well, that was easy, right? The reason I succeeded was because the situation was easy. And so we've got to reverse that perception and let them know that they can succeed. And again, this is going to take time and it's going to take a plan over time. I missed one there. It's a power seeker. Sometimes this is related to something that we'll talk about another day, which is aggressive behavior. The child comes to uh, view that the way that they feel powerful, and this is especially true, I think, with kids who are about 4 and they're going through a part of this autonomy where they're experimenting with power and social relationships, and they feel that the way for them to feel powerful is to be a little bully, to hurt other people or to force other people to do what they want them to. And the solution here, if you have that child who is sort of seeking power in inappropriate ways, is to make them the teacher's helper. It really is. Give them little jobs, give them ways to feel powerful in legitimate ways, give them choices to make, give them, uh, they're the line leader, make them feel legitimate, purposeful ways to feel power. Don't get into this kind of power struggle with them. Remain calm. Don't get your own feelings involved. And do not tolerate those aggressive bullying acts ever. Do not be inconsistent there. Sometimes children will violate the expectations because they are in microsystems that have different expectations. Um, they at home they watch wrestling and wrestling is fine. So now in the block area they have a hard time not wrestling or playing with toy guns, or I kind of snicker because in my mind I'm thinking of these 2 older 3-year-olds that just wanted to play football every day on the playground. And you know what? We were in Auburn, right near the football stadium where people play football. And so what's completely okay in one setting may not be okay in another. So the trick here is to talk to parents and other adults and to sort of making rules as consistent as you possibly can. And when they can't be, sometimes we say it is okay for wrestling at home, but we can't do it in the classroom. This is not a place that we can do that now. Sometimes rules are controversial. Sometimes a kid will look at you and say, well, that's not fair, or they don't like the rule. They don't think there's any importance to it. This is where explaining why the rules are important and why they are set are important, and why it's important that we only have legitimate rules. Sometimes we give children mixed messages. Sometimes we only follow through on that rule at certain times or with certain kids. And so we send them this idea that Maybe we mean it, maybe we don't. So this is why it's so important that we are consistent with our messages. And finally, sometimes children know what the rule is, they know what the expectation is, they know how to do it. They want to test the limits, and this is that place where we're really going to follow through here with the use of consequences. And a consequence is any event that makes a behavior more likely to happen again or less likely to happen again. So it could be positive, where it's more likely to be happening again, or it can be inhibiting, which will reduce the likelihood that it would happen again. And one type of inhibiting consequence is punishment. And we think about punishment, we think of something that's kind of harsh, that's power assertive, where the adult has the power and they use their force to make children do something. This type of inhibiting consequence doesn't support our goal of children's long-term development of self-regulation, because the regulator of their behavior is external to them. And what happens with punishment is children will comply quickly, but long-term not comply. And so you see sneakier kinds of behavior. Children, if the adult's not there, they think they can get away with it because they haven't internalized that reason for following that uh, rule. A negative consequence is something that's more constructive, it's intentional to help children learn and to help that long-term internalization. And there are going to be three types here. One type of negative consequence is a natural consequence. If nobody did anything, this is what would happen. And this is the type of learning that is the strongest lesson, especially for a concrete thinking child. And you've probably had that experience yourself, where some lesson you really learned very well is because you made a mistake and you had to live with that mistake. Um, so this can be the most powerful kind of learning experience. On the other hand, if it's going to hurt the child or hurt somebody else or tear things up, we can't allow that to happen. So even though a natural consequence can be the most valuable learning, it may not something we can allow to happen. So the second type of negative consequence is a logical consequence. It's not that natural outcome, but there's something tangible directly relating to the consequence and the child's behavior and the rule. There's some real connection there that the child can understand. There are three types of logical consequences. One is rehearsal, where we rehearse the appropriate behavior. Uh, if a child was running in the room, we might go back to the beginning and walk again. We rehearse doing it. Another is restitution. We fix the situation, restore it to the acceptable state. If the child ripped a page in the book, they may fix the book with tape, or they. This is where sometimes we come up with apologies and saying, "I'm sorry." Now, I think that's a really important kind of social rule, but I also don't think we should force children to say they're sorry. It should saying apologizing is something that children should mean, and we shouldn't just be perfunctory. And we've probably all seen children who learn that all they have to do is say "I'm sorry," and they're sort of off the hook there, whether they mean it or not. So restitution should be authentic and it should be real. So if a child really is able to make that other person feel better or apologize to them, that's perfectly appropriate. But it shouldn't be just a perfunctory kind of thing. The third is a temporary loss of privilege, where we interrupt that problem behavior. The children are throwing sand with the sand toys, and so I put the sand toys away for the rest of the day. That could be a logical consequence. The important thing here is, especially with young children, is that it's temporary. They'll have a chance to earn that privilege back again at another time. It's not forever. Um, and it's connected to what they're actually doing. So it's not walk inside the classroom now or we won't go outside on the playground later, where there's no real connection there. That would be an unrelated consequence, which is the third type. This isn't the natural connection here with what the child's doing. This is something the adult says. I see this in schools where teachers have kind of their favorite consequence. So they're following through by saying you'll miss recess, or you'll walk the lap at recess, or you'll stand in this certain spot, and it's their consequence that fits with every situation. And so by definition, it's not a logical consequence. This can also happen when you say, oh, we're not going to go on that field trip next week, or we're not going to have that special snack party that we were going to have. There's a distance in time between the behavior and that consequence, which really disrupts that feeling of connection. So here's the sort of decision tree. If you can allow the natural consequence to happen, let it happen, because that is the most powerful way of learning. If it's going to hurt someone or disrupt the situation, consider the logical consequences. How can that rule be reenacted? How can it be rehearsed, or how can restitution be? And the unrelated consequences really should just be a last resort. A consequence is always a warning. You'll remember choice was an important part of guidance. The warning is an either or statement, and it really should be an authentic choice that the child is making, because we want them to see that their behavior is the source of the consequence. So the warning is stated as a choice between the rule and the redirection or the consequence. So you may walk inside or will walk from the beginning of the classroom. So there's a choice there between, it's really between the rule or redirection and the consequence. And if the child does not choose uh, to follow the rule or redirection, and the adult gave that choice, the adult must follow through with that consequence that the choice was given for. And I like for the follow through to start with a brief reflection that stated something like, you chose to keep running. You decided to throw the sand. You wanted to do this. And so I'm putting that consequence directly into the child's choice, into their decision. And then you restate what the warning. Remember, I said, you may walk inside or we'd walk from the beginning. Now we will walk from the beginning. Remember, I said, keep the sand down low or I would put the sand toys away. Now I will put them away. You have to be consistent. If you give that choice, that warning choice, you have to follow through every single time. Otherwise, you are telling this classroom of kids, yeah, you might as well try it, because I may not mean it. You also have to use some good timing here. You have to be able to interrupt what the child is doing, but also give them a moment to legitimately have that choice. They may decide, you know what, I'm going to walk. You know what, I'm going to keep this hand down. Don't assume that they're going to not make that correct choice. When you make a rule or give a redirection, you should already be thinking about what the logical consequences are. So get in the habit of thinking about consequences that are natural outcomes and logical outcomes of your rules and redirections, of what your expectations are. Children, especially as they get older, should be able to think about their own ideas for consequences. What would happen if? Consequences should be stated in that warning that gives a choice. Those warnings are private, they're directly to the child, they're not a public display. I'm trying to guide everyone's behavior by giving this one child this public choice to sort of put them on display for everyone. And this shouldn't be like, haha, I told you so, but make sure children see the natural consequences that happen. So the natural consequence of not sharing your toys is playing alone. We don't want to say that to the child in a negative way that reinforces a negative self-image, but we do want them to think about what are the positive benefits of choosing to share. So we need to make sure that they are able to see those not natural consequences, but not in a way that's derogatory or harmful. Use those in order: personal message, warning, follow through. The reason for that order is to help children internalize that sense of regulation, self-regulation. Give them a chance to respond, give them a chance to comply. If you start a follow through, finish it. Now, it doesn't mean, so okay, here's going to be a weird example. Let's say a child stands up on the table and they're like, nah, 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 blah, 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 blah. and I say something like, "You're standing on the table. I'm worried everyone will be disrupted. Put your feet on the floor." And they go, "Blah, blah, 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 blah." And I say, "You may stand on the table. You may," no, I wouldn't say you may stand on the table. I'd say, "You may put your feet on the floor. I'll help you put your feet on the floor." And they go, "Blah, blah, 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 blah." And I say, "You've decided to stay on the table. Remember I said," and right there, they jump down onto the floor. Well, I'm not going to pick them up and put them back on the table just so I can put them down, right? But I still follow through. I don't just stop there. I say, "You decided to get on the floor. I'm so happy that you made that decision." I'm still connecting it to what they do. I don't just stop. I also let other adults know what's going on. So if I put those sand toys away, I make sure that everyone knows it, so somebody else doesn't just go say, "Oh, where are the sand toys?" and goes and gets them out, right? So make sure the other adults know what's going on. Something related to this is one of the kind of favorite logical consequences that sometimes people will adapt will be saying, uh, "You go somewhere else." So a child's playing in the sand table and they're getting water everywhere, and the adult goes through the personal message, "You're splashing the water. Um, I'm bothered that everyone's getting wet. Keep the splashing down." And they give them a warning: "You're still splashing. You may keep the water down or go somewhere else." And the "or go somewhere else" isn't really a very good consequence. It's a temporary loss of privilege. That's what the adult's looking for there. But we're not sending them to something, we're just sending them away. So we're taking this child who's already having a hard time at the water table, and we're just sending them some other way where they're going to become another adult's problem, right? So don't send a child away from something, send them to something specific. "You may keep the water in the water table, or you can come with me and read a book." You see? If you're going to use a temporary loss of privilege, don't just send them into the blank space. Send them to a specific place, and don't expect someone else to have to figure out their behavior once they move out of your area. Sometimes there can be differences between the expectations at home and between the program. As I said, make sure children understand that. Help them think of strategies and scripts that they can use to talk to themselves about what the expectations are. When they're following and complying with your rules and expectations, make sure to praise them and acknowledge that. And remember to actively think about children's self perceptions. This is some situations here, um, where we could think about some logical or natural consequences. I'm gonna uh, let you look at those later, or pause now and think about what sort of logical and natural consequences you could make in each of these situations. And here's some pitfalls uh, to avoid when we're thinking about the follow through. One is sometimes we get a little timid, and it's uncomfortable to go through that follow through, and so we just don't want to do it. Remember, you've got to be consistent and follow through, even if it's kind of difficult. Sometimes we'll use that favorite consequence rather than thinking about the one that's best suited or most logically connected to the current situation. Sometimes we won't even think about those natural consequences because we're so used to thinking about the logical ones. So remember that those should be considered. And just, it doesn't mean that the child who's following your expectations has to do it with a smile. They may very begrudgingly start to walk inside or keep those sand toys down. You're still praising them for following that expectation. And as adults, we're not going to get upset and kind of harbor that grudge. We're going to make sure that if we go through the follow through and a child is upset with us, we're going to make sure we have a positive interaction with them later in the day. Um, Again, I said this earlier, I don't think it's a good strategy to insist that children apologize if they don't really mean it. I want children to apologize. I want them to learn that social skill, but I don't want them to learn it's just a way of sort of being able, it's sort of a free card to do whatever you want as long as you just say "I'm sorry" later, and not really mean it. So I want them to internalize that and really mean it, And I think if we insist that they apologize, we're not helping them learn that lesson. I also think it's too we should expect incremental improvements, not overall quick immediate improvements. So here's that combination of the incomplete personal message sequence. First, we reflect. What is It could be a behavior, paraphrase, affective. What is the child doing from their point of view? It's a statement. The second is the react and reason. I'm impacted because of this. The third part is that rule or redirection where we tell the child what to do rather than what not to do. The fourth part is that warning. That's a choice. Either this, which is the redirection, or that, which is the consequence. It's what is the rule or what will happen. Give them a moment there to make their choice and then follow through. First, with that brief reflection from their point of view, you decided to, you chose to, you are still. Restate the warning. Remember, I said you could follow the rule or this consequence will happen. Now, here's the consequence. So, here's an example. It's a hot afternoon, and some children have a hard time sitting down for a nap, and they're whispering and looking out the window. The personal message: you're having fun talking. I'm concerned that other children can't sleep because you're making noise. You don't have to sleep, but be quiet during rest time. No more whispering. Sit quietly. The warning is, lie quietly on your own, or I will sit near you to remind you to rest. Follow through. You'd like to keep